Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Film Seizure. I'm Jason Oliver.
I am Jeff Arbuckle.
I'm Chuck Moore.
And today we have a little bit of illusion, a little bit of real magic,
Wizardry.
and a little bit of wizardry. Yes, indeed. Today we have 2006, Christopher Nolan's sort of under the radar 2006, The Prestige.
Yes.
Indeed.
Prestige. Yes, with
So-
that's we've got some Christian Bale, hot off of becoming Batman. We've got Hugh Jackman, who was Wolverine.
Yeah,
and we
that
have the
guy.
Black Widow in it too.
Yeah,
and
lots of
Coyote Ugly.
heroes. Little Coyote Ugly, little Alfred,
Yeah,
some Ziggy Stardust,
some Ziggy Stardust.
some
Yeah,
Schmeagol.
And this is Christian Bale and Alfred working together, Michael Caine, working together like 2 movies in a row, I think.
Yeah,
Maybe
so
3.
This came, I think it was 3, probably 4, because this came after Batman Begins, and it was really kind of essentially the sort of movie that Nolan probably wouldn't have gotten funding for necessarily, at least not at the budget he got, had it not been for the success of Batman Begins. Because he got $40 million to make this movie, and it did pretty well. It's kind of a safe bet. Hey, from all the people you loved in that last Batman movie, from the director of that last Batman movie, here's this totally not Batman movie, but it looks pretty cool. And a lot of people saw it.
plus Wolverine. It's the Wolverine factor. You add Wolverine to anything, you sell more issues.
Right.
Yeah,
You know.
but yeah, this definitely has that kind of cast that is destined to make money, right? Right from the jump. So yeah, and it's kind of like I always like that when a director does a big studio picture. It's like, all right, well, I did one for you, now you'll do one for me, you know?
Right.
So he's like, this is a movie I want to make next. I'll make another Batman movie, but I want to make this one first. And that's kind of how this movie came to be.
Yeah, and he wrote it, produced it. I wrote it with his brother. I think Jonathan probably wrote the majority of it, but I don't know for sure. They worked together quite a bit.
Yes, indeed. So this was one that I did not see in the theater, though. Did you see it in the theater, Chuck?
You know what? I was thinking about that last night, and I don't think so. Braden was born that year, so I didn't do a whole lot of movie going. But I remember being super excited about it for the reasons you mentioned before.
Yeah.
And I think this was up against, I wish I could remember the movie name, the Edward Norton.
The Illusionist. Yeah.
The Illusionist.
It came out around the same time.
And I remember a lot of people liking or falling on the side of The Illusionist and choosing that movie for some reason. Not for having seen both of them, but to go to. They're like, well, I'm going to go see The Illusion. I remember a lot of talks like that when those were coming out.
Yeah, I think that most people who saw both, though, would agree that they like this one a lot better.
Yes.
Although I have heard that The Illusionist has gotten somewhat of a reappraisal in the past few years. I haven't seen it since I saw it on video the one time, and I didn't think a ton of it.
No, I didn't.
But I was also viewing it in the shadow of The Prestige. So,
right.
Because The Prestige is, in my opinion, about as perfect a movie as you can make. It is just the tightest possible script. It pays off exactly like what it's talking about, like as a magic trick, right?
There's so many layers to that in this film that are just wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you think about like a 3-act movie, it's the same as a 3-act magic trick. And the third part of a magic trick is The Prestige, and that's the name of this movie. And that's your final act of this movie, essentially.
Right.
There's just the layers in this movie around that. Is really well done. It's incredibly well acted. It just feels like a movie that everybody involved with is sort of involved in something that they know is special, that they like a lot. Yeah. And
everyone was
that
invested.
Yeah.
Yeah. Before you go, Jeff, because I know this is this was the first time you saw this, so I'm really interested in your thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
I echo Jason's sentiments and also think this is one of the whenever somebody asks me what's your favorite movie, this is one of the films that I think of.
Mm-hmm.
I always say The Usual Suspects, but every time I see this, I find new things to appreciate. It's not necessarily the same with The Usual Suspects or some of my other favorite films. But yeah, Jeff, what did you think watching this for the first time?
Yeah, so this was the first time that I'd seen this. I have, to be honest with you, I have not seen too many Christopher Nolan movies. I've seen Memento. I've seen the 3 Batman movies. I've seen this one, and I've seen, what's the Insomnia?
Oh,
Those
yeah.
so those are, I mean, and the other ones, I haven't really seen. And
You've seen most.
Interstellar is the other one. But
You've seen most of his stuff then. I mean, there's only a few
some of
things
his,
you haven't.
like the big ones, like his Dunkirk,
Or
I
Inception.
just did not have any interest in Dunkirk. Don't really have any interest in Inception, to be honest with you. And to be honest with you, this movie probably fell into that for all those years, as just being a movie where it's like, oh, okay, yeah, a lot of people like it, but did not really stand out to me initially as a movie that, oh, I need to see this. Now we're covering it here on this podcast, and I don't think we've mentioned that this is one of our quarantine sessions.
Mm-hmm.
So again, if audio gets wonky, everybody, we apologize. It's all part of the illusion.
Jeff is our wizard.
I am. So, and so coming into this, it's like, okay, well, I like the cast a lot. This cast is insane.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was even like, Piper Perabo is in this. It's like, she's in this. It's like there's that many people in it that they have Piper Perabo. But you've got like David Bowie in it as Nikola Tesla, which is, I mean, that's pretty inspired, really.
Yeah.
You've got Scarlett Johansson really at the beginning of her rise to stardom, with an kind of kind of really doing a lot of work in this movie,
Right.
between doing an accent, being a character that I do have some stuff to say about later. You also have Rebecca Hall, which it's like she's got a lot of weight to carry too in this movie. And so coming into it, I was like, it's like, okay, well, this could be interesting. It's got a nice little, it's got a great cast. It comes from prestige, if you will, from Christopher Nolan and stuff like that. And getting into it, I was like, okay, it's like some of the things that I really kind of like was that you have characters, you have these little side characters in this movie, like the little boy that's the nephew of the Rebecca Hall character, who knows immediately that the trick killed a dove, and
Right.
is quite upset about it. And it's like he sees through kind of this guy's bullshit, kind of, and so it's like stuff like that, which was, a lot of fun. Of course, it was nominated for cinematography and art direction, and absolutely,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely, this is just it's a gorgeous movie to look at.
Right.
And so you also have these really kind of fascinating concepts in it, and I'm sure we're going to dig a lot deeper into the concepts about, revenge and, your desire to be the best at what you do, and secrets and lies and, all of that. However, and here comes my prestige, I don't like this movie.
Oh, whoa.
Weirdo.
So yeah,
Before we go too much further, we should say that it's impossible to talk about this movie without completely
Yeah.
ruining.
have to completely ruin this movie, which I think for the most part that's probably okay. If you've seen this movie, you wanna hear what we all think about everything.
And if you haven't, go watch it now, please.
Yeah, go watch it and come back, because that's the thing. It's like, this is impossible to talk about without it being.
We have to give everything away. We have to ruin the magic trick.
Yeah, we have to ruin the magic trick. We'll get to where this movie lost me. But I will say, in my defense, and Jason, I don't know if we've ever talked about this on the show, but I used to, when I was younger, I would always look at movies in sections. And and I could say that in almost every movie that I've ever seen, at some point, you get to a point where I say, this is where I begin really liking a movie, or it's my favorite part of a movie that changes the tone, or is a certain tone, or sets a certain tone. And I start to attach more, not nostalgia, but sentimentality for a section. And then, like, I would grow up and say, remember when all of the, remember that whole part where everything is like this and everything is great, and then it gets to the point where the characters have grown up and lost touch, or they become, one of them betrays some of and then that kind of sends the movie down a different path that I'm not as sentimental about. I think a lot of that comes from the fact that my favorite Disney movie is Fox and the Hound, and there is absolutely a point in that movie where shit twists and turns, and it's not as fun as it was, and it gets into like the real shit, and I think that growing up loving that kind of tampered with some of how I view certain movies or certain things, where everything is nice and then it turns dark, or everything was dark and then it becomes better, or something like that. So there's definitely a point like that where, when I was watching this movie on Friday, I was like, hey, this reminds me of when I used to watch movies as a younger person, and there's a turn here that this movie takes that completely and totally changed the trajectory of this movie for me.
Okay, I can think of a few different places where that might happen. So I'm curious.
Well, I had concerns about one thing right before the other thing that was like, okay, there's where we're at. Okay, so we'll get to that. Now, that being said, I absolutely positively, because I was talking to another one of our friends about this, another Shannon, who loves this movie too, and I was like, hey, I get it. I get why people love this movie. It just wasn't. It didn't fulfill the promise for me. And I said that this movie is absolutely. You've already said it. Both of you, I think, have already mentioned this. How this is 100% a magic trick.
Yeah.
And people are going to respond to it in various ways. They're going to be wowed by it, or they're going to try to see through it. Mm-hmm. And I think this time I fell on the other side of it.
That's interesting. I'm the kind of person who, I don't know if you ever see this show. It's on Netflix. It's called Magic for Humans, and it's this magician guy. I think of like an affable David Blaine. It's this guy, right?
Oh, okay.
It's a very, very fun show. Very tongue in cheek. He's just a super approachable, nice guy, magician, right? Street magician,
right?
And he does some stuff that blows my goddamn mind, and it drives me fucking crazy.
Are you Harrison Ford, like trying to like, motherfucker, get out of my house?
Yes, totally. And Susan is the opposite. She just likes the trick, but I want to know how they did the damn thing, right? And it drives me crazy that I don't have all the information either, because I'm convinced that there's camera tricks or whatever that I'm not that they're shooting around. There has to be in some of these cases, right?
Sure.
So anyway, this movie, what I love about The Prestige is that the first time I watched it, it tricked me, and like Michael Caine says, they want to be tricked. Sure. And we've talked about that concept before of people want to be tricked, they don't want to be lied to, right?
Exactly.
And this movie did a wonderful job of tricking me. what I love about this movie even more, and I know Chuck wants to get into this as well, is that you can go back to it and you can start to see through the trick. But it doesn't ruin the movie because you see all the clues. You see every point of the way where Christopher Nolan is telling you what this movie is. I mean,
Right.
they telegraph the twist in the very first scene.
Right.
You know, it's all there. And what then you start to listen to some of the things the characters say to each other, especially Christian Bale's character, the things he says when people ask him questions about things, and he answers with "I don't remember" or "I don't know," or you know, you start to think, "Oh my God, it's because you know he doesn't," right? And we'll
Right.
get into that. We'll get into that in a little bit. And there's just all these little things sprinkled through it. And then you think about, yeah, the revenge and the rivalry and the total commitment to your art and those themes. But then you parallel that with Edison versus Tesla, right? Which is
Hmm.
already a huge thing that I'm fascinated by, is their rivalry.
Right. Right.
So then you're sprinkling that and you start really digging into, you know, who those two men were and their rivalry. And you kind of come to the realization that, oh man, this is their story, right? In a way. So it's just there's just so much to go back to, I think, is why I love this movie. And it's all there for you to figure out. It's not hidden. It's just all constructed in a way to trick you, but it's never disingenuous, I guess, in how it does that.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, here's the thing. Also, it's like I I have a laundry list of things I can say I really liked about this movie.
Sure.
It's just that, you know, and this was again, and I said this, Jason, during our Terminator Dark Fate review, where you know I saw it and it's like, okay, it's fine, but it's not great or
Right.
whatever. And I said that, you know, when you look at like the Rotten Tomato score, 70%, it's like, yeah, I like that movie 70%. That's fair, you know. And this movie, it's Rotten Tomato score is 75-25, right? 75%. And I'm like, that's about right. But but certain points though, the 25% begins to outweigh for me.
Mhm.
But again, like I say, you know, it's like I completely and totally understand why people like this. It's, you know, it's like, you know, some people like card tricks, some people don't.
Mhm.
You know, and that's it's not that they don't think that that there's some impression or that there's something to be impressed by. It's just that it didn't land for them, you know, or whatever.
Fair. So let's
So.
talk about it. Let's get into it. I think it'd be fun to talk about this movie in three acts, right?
Okay. Yeah.
I think, you know, the three acts of a card trick are the pledge, where you show something ordinary. The second act is the turn, where you make the ordinary into something extraordinary.
Hmm.
And then, so for instance, you disappear, you make something disappear, right? That would be the turn. But the prestige is the final flourish. It's the icing on the cake, if you will. It's when you bring the thing that has disappeared, when you bring it back, right?
Yep.
Because it's got to kind of tie the knot, if you will, which is part of our pledge. We lost you, Chuck.
Oh, is he just?
I don't have his audio.
I went muted
He was
somehow.
muted. Yeah.
I was
So-
going to say the way Michael Caine says, it's not enough that you make it disappear. You have to bring it back.
Yeah.
It's like he explains the whole idea so well in like one line in the movie. But yeah, go ahead, continue.
Yeah, so let's get into it. Let's what's the setup to the movie? What's the first act? Who are we introduced to, and what do we learn?
Yeah, so I mean, the beginning of the movie, we see Christian Bale and Hugh Jackman participating in a stage magician's act.
The great Ricky Jay.
The great Ricky Jay, played by Ricky Jay.
Yeah, he was also a consultant on the film. He helped Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale with their stage performance.
Right.
Yeah.
He was in Tomorrow Never Dies. He was Henry Gupta, the guy who steals the GPS system to to start World War III between England and China. But anyway,
Ricky Jay also a great. He was part of David Mamet's cast, like kind of what do they call that when you have a troupe, right? The returning cast of actors that appear in your movies. He was a David Mamet guy, and a really good close-up magic like card trick guy. And in fact, he also, I don't know if you ever saw him on. He did a lot of late night TV appearances. He could throw playing cards like fucking Gambit from X-Men.
Oh yeah, you can
cut their bananas and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, crazy stuff. Real cool guy.
Cut them bananas.
He's passed away now. There's a good documentary about him as well. If anybody wants to dig deeper into Ricky Jay, fascinating guy.
So he is doing this trick. Piper Perabo is his assistant, and I don't blame Hugh Jackman. I'd probably kiss her leg while I was.
She's she's Angier's wife.
Angier's wife, which is Hugh Jackman.
Yep.
And so so they basically are tying her up. They're going to drop her into a thing of water, and there's a trick lock, and she'll be able to get out. She'll be able to slip the ropes and get out within a minute.
Which has always cracked me up because this isn't Ricky Jay's trick at all. Like it's all Piper Perabo.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. He's just the one doing the
I mean, she's the Houdini here.
Right,
you know?
she is.
Yeah.
So anyway, so she and off stage with an axe and a stopwatch is Michael Caine, who plays Cutter, who builds these trick.
He's an ingenue.
Yep.
Yeah.
Ingenue, which I always thought was something else, but
I did too, actually.
Yeah,
I thought, Piper Perabo is an ingenue, is what I would have thought, or Scarlett Johansson would be an art, but no, that's what.
But that makes sense actually, because Fallon
is an ingenue.
Fallon his ingenue. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like basically he's your Mickey in your corner. You know, he's teaching you how to use the tricks of the trade and all of that. So
can I stop us for 1 second?
Yes, go right ahead.
Jason, you or both of you, do you guys want to bring up the clues that are dropped during these scenes now, or go back over these scenes later with the cool clues that are dropped? Because there's a big one dropped at the beginning of this one.
Let's go back. Actually,
will we be able to remember? Because there's a lot.
There are a lot. Well, one of the lines here at the beginning of it it doesn't give a whole lot away, but Borden says we were just two young men trying to make it in the magic world. And then you're introduced to Borden and Angiers. But
right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, okay. I see that.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's a good point. That's good to bring up. And honestly, I don't know why I'm doing a lot of talking, right? This is your guys' movie. Chuck, do you want to take the baton from me here?
So sure. Yeah, they show Borden tying the knot on the wrists of Piper Perabo's character. I forget her name. And he slips the knot. Whatever that means. He like drops it or does something weird with it when he's trying to tie it.
He just ties a different type of knot. She's got to be able to slip. She's got to be able to slip the knot. And
right.
There's specific knots that are wet knots and not wet knots. And
right.
And the one that Michael Caine wants him to tie is a wet knot, which is easier to slip. But Christian Bale says that his knot is tighter, but it can still be slipped, but it looks tighter. It looks more convincing. And
she won't fall off the hook.
Right. Yeah.
But I think he ties the right knot this time. I think. But it doesn't matter. She escapes.
He tied it too tight, I think, is what they bitched about him.
Maybe,
that time. I think that's what they were bitching to him about after this one.
But she escapes, and it creates a little bit of tension between the three main characters. Michael Caine is kind of hilarious in this scene, the way he's yelling and everything. He's backstage. He's great every scene in this movie.
Yeah,
he's always yelling or telling someone they're an idiot or ushering people out of areas or whatever. But after this trick, Borden is saying it's not enough. We need to be pressing. We need to be magicians need to push the envelope, basically. And he keeps doing the same shit. And Kane is arguing with him that what he's doing is working with him. And Jeers is very quiet during this whole scene, which I always found interesting. He doesn't really say anything. Because it turns out later he's the one that really freaks out about pushing the envelope and figuring stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, Kane says, there's a Chinaman who does a show down the street. If either of you, I want you both to go there. If either of you can figure out the trick, I'll give you 10 minutes of stage time with the great whoever. I can't remember the person's name. But,
well, Ricky Jay was Milton. Is that right? Milton?
Yes, Milton the magician.
Milton the magician.
Yeah.
There is another clue in this scene too, when it might be Hugh Jackman challenges Christian Bale on what's so great, what trick do you have up your sleeve or whatever, and he's like, well, no one else can do my trick.
Oh, right.
So he's already kind of telegraphing the fact that he has a unique situation. That
he's also pushing quite a bit for a bullet catch, which Michael Caine is absolutely against.
Right.
Because that can very easily backfire.
Yeah, the bullet catch. The point there is that what you do is you have someone kind of load a gun, but in a specific way that they don't realize that you're able to kind of
remove the bullet from
the gun. Yeah, but anybody can kind of slip something in there. Like you could get somebody who is coming from the audience who might slip like a screw in there or something, and
a button. They said as little as a button.
Even a button. Yeah.
Pretty much anything that gets propelled out of the gun becomes deadly.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. So bullet catches are pretty dangerous, but they bring people in as well. Yeah. Okay, so they go to see the Chinese magician, and this is a really interesting scene because what the magic that he's doing isn't necessarily flashy, but for two trained magicians, they're mystified by it.
They can't figure it out.
They can't figure it out, and because of the physical demands that the trick has, and that the man doing it seems to be a frail individual who wouldn't be able to execute the physical demands.
Hugh Jackman can't even carry a fishbowl without water in between his knees.
Right.
To make it appear, the way that he thinks that it works. He just cannot fathom how this little old man who's hunched over, who can barely walk, is able to do it. I think he even says something like, he says something about like the strength he must have in his thighs or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
This is another moment where you start to see a divergence in the two characters, where Christian Bale does figure it out. He looks at the old man and he looks at him getting kind of loaded very gingerly into his carriage, and he says, "That's the trick."
Right.
This guy isn't really this frail. Essentially, this is total devotion to his craft. Hugh Jackman can't believe it. He's like, well, he's never been spotted in public any other way.
He can't understand anything that goes beyond the stage. That's his whole problem the entire movie.
Well, he lacks imagination.
Right.
He's a showman, but he lacks imagination. Whereas Christian Bale is the exact opposite. Christian Bale has total devotion. He'll do anything he can for the trick and for the craft, but he has no showmanship.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got no charisma.
Right. Yeah, and that's in equal measure they're able to entertain because of their strengths, but neither one of them has the whole package. So they would be better off working together, but that's not going to happen because of what happens next.
Right.
So this movie is basically told. It's told in a non-linear fashion too, because it jumps from the present, in which Christian Bale is on trial, and it's being told essentially through journals
Right.
in the past. So that's important to note as well, because there's trickery made with each other's journals too.
Right.
Yep.
So yeah, basically, at the start of the movie, Christian Bale is a little bit more of a grifter. You get the impression that he's a little bit more of a grifter. He's a little bit more of a loner. He does not have much going for him other than the desire to be the best. Whereas Hugh Jackman seems to be maybe a little bit more mature.
He's affluent. He comes from money. He's all that.
He's got a wife. He's a little bit cleaner in his presentation, or at least how he presents to the public.
He's much more conservative in his approach to things. He's not reckless. Yeah.
He seems to probably have more of the trust of Michael Caine too.
Oh, for sure.
Because he tends to listen to Michael Caine, whereas Christian Bale seems to be kind of all over the place. Mm-hmm. As another clue.
Well, he has his own. Yeah, he has his own ideas of what works. He's all over the place. That is true.
Yeah. So so there's another performance. They're going to do the same trick. They're going to drop Piper Perabo into the water. Everybody has basically lectured Border, who's Christian Bale, to tie the goddamn proper knot. And there's a little bit of tenseness when he's tying her hands, because her hands are more important than her feet. Right. It's like, it doesn't really matter how her feet are necessarily tied. It's really important how her hands are tied.
Yeah, because she's got to slip that knot, otherwise she can't pick the lock. Yeah.
Right.
But he's tying the knot, and she nods at him, like, "Go ahead, do it." Basically, she's on board, I think, with the tighter knot.
Right, or whatever. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, you get the sense that she's like I said before, she's the Houdini. She's the one who's like, she wants to challenge herself.
Right.
She's the actual illusionist on the stage.
Escape artist. Yeah.
At least for this. Yeah.
Yeah.
At least
she's probably the most talented of them all, potentially, at least from an escape artist standpoint.
Right.
Yeah.
She gets dropped in. Michael Caine starts the stopwatch. Minute passes. He bum rushes the stage with the axe to cut her out, and she's drowning.
Mm-hmm.
And she does drown, which essentially at this point completely and totally destroys whatever Angier was.
Mm-hmm.
Because at this point he cannot see past the fact that Borden. Is it?
It's Borden.
Borden. Yeah, that's right. I said Border earlier. Borden is completely and totally. He's a wild card. You can't trust him. And when something that you could, this is kind of a universal thing. Like if there's any danger involved in anything that you do, you cannot not trust the person that you're working with. And when they go to the funeral, he asks, "Hey, Borden, what knot did you tie?" And he can't answer.
It's another important clue. He says, "I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know."
Yeah, I don't know what I tied.
Yeah. And it's not I don't remember. It's I don't know. Yeah.
I just don't know. So they kind of go their separate ways. So that's pretty much Act 1 at that point, I would say.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I can't remember. I think now after Act 1, they show Angier's going to Tesla. And we don't exactly know. Somewhere in this portion, they show Angier's going to Tesla.
He shows up in Colorado Springs, and he's surprised to see that the entire town has electricity.
Yep.
It looks beautiful. That is one of my favorite just establishing shots in the movie is the town of Colorado Springs with all
looking down into the valley.
Yeah. And all the lights coming on. And, it's beautiful. Yeah. And can you imagine that in the 19th century, seeing that?
some people, yeah,
It's real magic when you think, for
right.
people who don't have any understanding of the science and the fact that the science was so new. I mean, you have, Tesla and Edison were modern wizards in many ways.
Right.
They're like the creators of fire in some ways,
Yeah, and
Prometheus.
Prometheus, yeah.
Edison had railed against Tesla so hard that he has to hide up in a mountain, you know,
Yeah, Edison was very
away from everyone.
powerful. Edison had very powerful friends like Henry Ford and others. He was definitely plugged in. He knew how to play the politics of what he was doing. Yeah. And Tesla obviously was also a foreigner and didn't have that. But by all accounts, by many accounts, Tesla was the more brilliant mind. He just was unable to.
Tesla was not a showman. He was like Borden.
Right. Yes.
They're very much alike in that way. Whenever they show Tesla's experiments, they're very scary.
They're
like
loud, and they
yeah.
I mean,
Absolutely.
imagine turning on a light switch and just to get a fucking light in your bedroom. Yeah.
But it's amazing though, because I guess the novel plays up on that a lot more of the parallels between those two, and then yeah, I do too. But it's just interesting because most of Tesla's ideas, like alternating current and things, are what became the standard bearer of electricity. Even to this day, and Edison's are not.
Right, it's Tesla that has statues at Niagara Falls, not Edison.
Right. But when people think of the father of electricity, they still think of Edison. He's the first person who comes to mind. So his people still to this day misappropriate Tesla's legacy as Edison's, which is a shame. Yeah. Anyway.
So
again, we're kind of playing with that shifting time frame too, because it's at this point in the story. Yeah, you're right. I think that's when you first see him showing. He's got a limp. He's walking with a cane. He's not walking with Michael Caine.
Yeah,
he's there seems to be more desperation.
He's on a fucking mission now. He's on a mission. Yeah.
But then it also switches around back to before then, but not, where he's trying to figure out how to basically get over his wife's death. And then also meanwhile, Borden is playing small shows to not much fanfare.
Yeah. So Angiers gets turned away by Edison or by Tesla at this point. Angiers has a new assistant. ScarJo is his new assistant. And Michael Caine is still working for him. So we realize at this point that Borden has been basically shunned from the group. Yeah. Nobody wants to work with him anymore. Michael Caine hates him. It seems at that point anyway.
Oh yeah.
And like you said, he's doing small shows, but he did get the 10 minutes on stage that he was promised, I think. Maybe not, but the scene that you alluded to earlier where the magician makes the bird disappear.
Yeah.
I think he's working with just
maybe he is just some weirdo
at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, because that
is Rebecca Hall, his wife.
Yep.
Right. And also this is kind of like playing this is like a band playing at a local tavern. It's like it's real small. It's it's the restaurant table to table magician almost, except for
it's like the magician that shows up at the library, for the
you're right. It definitely wasn't the 10 minutes. It definitely wasn't that. But this is a cool scene because it has a nice clue in it as well. The magician, as we see early in the movie, this cage trick kills the bird.
And you just got to have a bunch of birds on hand.
Right. Yeah. So this cage trick kills the bird, and then you bring another bird out. And Borden is watching his wife during the scene, who has her nephew. And they do the trick, and this boy just starts crying.
Yeah.
Like crying
he's wise to the trick. Yeah.
Even when they bring the bird back, he's like, "But where's his brother?"
Yeah.
And and Borden pays particularly close attention to this. He's like, here's a kid who's seeing right through this trick.
Mm-hmm.
So he tries to go up to him and show him the bird and be like, see, he's still here. He's fine. And he's like, no.
Not fine. Yeah.
No.
He knows what he saw. Yeah.
Right.
And he's smart enough to know, like, the mind of a child, right? It's like yeah, there's
he sees through the bullshit.
He sees through it. He sees what he saw, and there's no magic here that brought this bird back. His mind is very, very applied to reality. He's like, no, there's no magic. There's a trick, but yeah, and I do think that Christian Bale finds that fascinating.
Yeah,
he's like, okay, how can I make a trick? He's got a trick already in his mind that can't be replicated, and that can have that is going to truly blow people's minds, right?
Right.
Like, how do I make someone disappear and reappear in a way that is impossible to decipher?
Yeah, where you can't say the original is dead. The original is dead. This is not the original that's reappearing here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he's still doing, just back alley magic kind of crap. He's doing a bullet catch routine. And that's something very important happens at the bullet catch routine that he's doing. He asks for a volunteer from the crowd. And the thing that Michael Caine always warned about happens. The person that comes up from the crowd has ulterior motives, and that just happens to be Angier.
A very poorly disguised Angier.
Yes, yes. And he, Christian Bale realizes too soon what's about to happen. Angier takes aim and fires at Christian Bale and shoots his fingers off.
Fallon saves him, though. Fallon comes over from the side and pushes Angier's arm. So Fallon is basically Borden's right-hand man.
Yeah.
He's his ingenue, as he calls him. And Borden just has his hands up like, okay, I'm dead.
Mm-hmm.
And Fallon comes over and hits his arm, which shoots off his pinky and his ring finger.
Yes. So yes.
From his hand.
It's his. Is it his left hand? I think it's his left hand.
I think so. I can't remember.
Yes, it's definitely his left hand.
But then at this point as well, he's married to Rebecca Hall. There's a couple really, really good clues around this time when Rebecca Hall tells him, Christian Bale, that she's pregnant. Christian Bale says something along the lines of, "Oh, we should have told Fallon."
Yep.
Very important clue.
And he says, "We're having a baby."
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
There's then also the clue where there's a little bit of time passes after his hand is shot, and it's bleeding again, and Rebecca Hall is bandaging it, and she's like, "I don't understand why it's
how is this bleeding again?
Still bleeding again." Yep, exactly.
She also often asks him to if he loves her, and she says, "Well, today you do. No, you don't always, because I can see it in your eyes. You don't.
There's some days when you're more in love with magic." Yeah. Yeah. Good clues. So then, at this point, the rivalry has gone to the place of the extreme. They're at this point willing to harm one another, to one up one another. It's not just a matter of who's got the best trick. It's a matter of really who lives and who dies in a lot of ways. But at this around this time that go ahead, Chuck.
I was just going to say that Michael Caine goes to Angier's and they set up. I don't know if this is what you're going to talk about next, but Michael Caine gets Angier's an act, basically.
In a big auditorium.
In a big auditorium with a new trick where a bird won't be harmed, right? They devise this cage trick because Angier's is like, I don't want to kill any birds.
Yeah. You're going to have to get your hands dirty.
You're going to have to get your hands dirty if you want to, which is a very important line in this movie. But they devised this trick where the bird has a thread like tied around its leg. Excuse me, somebody else take over real quick.
I don't quite understand the full mechanics of how they pull this off, but the long and short of it is that they're able to do the bird cage trick where they collapse the cage on the bird without the bird being
Right.
killed.
The bird, they can fling the bird out with the string,
Right.
and then bring it, and it brings him behind his back, basically.
And bring the actual same bird back.
Right. And he's like, well, I thought you said that I would have to get my hands dirty. And it's like, well, I was just proving that you could.
Yeah.
In a very Michael Caine way.
Yeah. Always with the advice, that Michael Caine.
Yeah, always with the advice, that darn Michael Caine. No, Michael Caine is one of my favorite characters in this movie, just because it is Michael Caine, to be honest with you. He's so matter-of-factly in a lot of ways, and he's very it's one of those things where it's like, well, you're going to do what I tell you, and then I'll tell you why you're doing what I tell you later, because you don't need to know that right now, or whatever.
He's the one who's wise.
Right.
He's been around the block. He's seen it all. He knows every trick and how it's done.
Right. And sometimes you don't. Sometimes you just don't have to. Sometimes you just don't have to ask questions. Just do it, and then get comfortable with it, and then I'll tell you why we did it this way later.
I like that Michael Caine gets to go be full on Cockney in this movie too. Like,
yeah.
Christopher Nolan's like, just do you, man. Yeah. There was no studio note or no director who said you need to tone that down. He gets to be his Cockney, self, totally unfiltered, which I love that. But so then yes, so now Borden, he sees this trick and it's like, all right, well, I got something that can beat that, right? And that's when he starts to unveil the transporting man.
Right.
Which is
now, but before he does that, though, he kills the bird.
Oh yes, yes, you're right. There's a very, very important scene. He does the same thing that Angier did to him. He comes up on stage posing as a member of the audience, and he
collapses the cage,
sabotages the trick, collapses the cage onto Angier's fingers. Yeah,
and there's my voice.
He misses Angier's hand. He crushes the fingers of one of the volunteers, which gets him fired for harming the guests.
Yeah.
Yes,
indeed. So now you have it. They've now essentially sabotaged each other. It's a full on, malicious rivalry of
At this point, I wrote the note, this is magical spy versus spy.
Yeah.
It is. It really is.
Yeah. But this is Tesla and Edison. I mean, this is, Thomas Edison sending his spies to his goons, to fuck with Tesla's shit. It's the smear campaigns that Tesla, put out into the media about Tesla's inventions. Yeah. So this is very directly paralleled in their story, and also in the story of other magicians. I can't remember the names of the two magicians, but these two characters are, I think it was a levitation illusion that two magicians in the 19th century competed over in kind of the same way, trying to steal each other's trick and that. Yeah.
I want to mention my daughter loves this movie.
Yeah, I wanted to hear some of her. You said that you had some notes or something.
Yeah, she never wrote the notes that I wanted her to, but I recall some of her comments. And at this point, she was like, "Would people in the past really do this to one another? Like, would magicians do this to one another?" And I was like, "Yeah, like a lot of people throughout history have tried to sabotage one another, and I think there were less rules back then, so people could get away with it a lot." And she was kind of mystified by that.
She also, this is kind of like Wild West rules. It's like it's kind of the law enforcement came from the specter of a gun,
right?
Not from law.
Right. It was a threat. Yeah. But she also she pointed out a few clues that I won't mention right now, that I think there's so many in this movie that I forget them a lot. But specifically when Borden said, "I don't know,"
Sure.
After that scene where Andrews was asking about the knot, she was like astutely pointed out exactly why that was. And I was like, oh yeah, I wasn't even thinking of that.
Right.
But yeah.
Right, because when I first saw that scene, it's like, I was just thinking, it's like, well, yeah, I mean, he's showing humanity in one way, and he just doesn't know. He just simply doesn't know, and because he knows that maybe there's no answer that's going to bring any solace anyway. That's how I just kind of took it. But yeah, I mean,
Right.
that obviously knowing the prestige, if you will, then yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense.
And I think that's the brilliance of this movie, as Jason brought up in the past, to take a brief segue, is that every time you're given the answer in this movie, it seems like a genuine reaction from a character, not a ruse necessarily.
Right.
Well,
And that's what I love about it.
We have a very pivotal moment coming up where that is illustrated.
Yes.
So the transporting man is the trick that Christian Bale has unveiled. It's the trick that he alluded to earlier in the movie that only he can do his trick, and it's very simple. He's doing bullet catch tricks and everything, and just other stuff, and people just aren't really liking it anymore. It's like, okay, here's what you've come for. Oh, he's doing the rings, right? He's like he's trying to pad out his act at this point, and then everybody's kind of like, boo, whatever. He's like, all right, I've got a trick for you. And he there's two boxes, basically door frames on the stage, but they're boxes, and he walks into one, and as he walks into one, he throws a ball down towards the other box that's on the other side of the stage. He walks into one box and then immediately walks out of the other. And you don't actually see the whole trick the first time they show it, which is I find interesting. You know what the prestige is in that trick, but they don't actually show it. Your imagination just picks it up. It's like,
I think this is the turn in the movie. I think that's why you don't see the full trick. You see the man disappear and he's gone, right?
Absolutely.
This is the turn.
We are into the turn for sure.
So they don't show the prestige for
so
that
they don't show
reason,
the prestige yet. Yep, I totally agree. But it then cuts to Michael Caine, Hugh Jackman, and Scarlett Johansson all discussing the trick.
Right.
And Hugh Jackman calling it the greatest trick he's ever seen.
Right. And
how well does
Cutter
he deliver that line too?
Perfect.
Yeah.
You believe
so
it.
Great.
You absolutely
Yeah.
believe it.
Yeah.
And this
And
is
this
where
is
you start
the point-
doing these two things.
This is the point where you take Angier's
Mm-hmm.
curiosity over the trick is what makes this movie. If you don't believe he's genuine, the movie falls apart here.
Yeah.
But if you believe him, if you believe his sincerity here, then you can carry on in the film.
Yeah,
If that makes sense.
Because this is the moment where Michael Caine says, "Well, I know he does it." Michael Caine's seen every trick. He's like, "I know he does it. He has a double, right?" And this is where then Scarlett Johansson steps in and she says, "It's not a double.
He wears a padded glove.
He wears a padded glove, right? And they both have it. They both are missing, fingers. One walks in and the other walks out, and it's the same person with the same missing fingers." And Hugh Jackman is like convinced it's not a double. And his conviction, you're right, Chuck, sells the rest of the movie for me, because this is where you believe in the reality or you believe in magic.
Right.
Who are you going to believe? Who are you going to call? And then the rest of the movie is essentially about the rest of Borden's fall at the hands of essentially sabotage and trickery. Excuse me. And then Hugh Jackman and Gier's obsession with finding what you might call real magic, or really just trying to figure out how Borden does his trick. It's all he really wants to know. He wants to know how he did it. He wants to replicate it and make it better, because he knows he's the better showman.
Yeah.
And he could take that same trick and make it huge.
So now I think this may have happened shortly before in the story, but Christian Bale has been convicted. Borden's been convicted, and he is in jail awaiting execution, basically. And I can't remember the guy's name. Someone comes to visit him and said
it's Roger Reese. From,
Roger Reese, yeah.
Yeah, he's Robin Colcord from Cheers.
Yes. He's also in multiple other things as well, but he introduces another character, a new character, Lord Caldwell, who wants Borden's tricks before he dies.
He's a collector.
He's a collector. So he in return for his tricks, he offers Angier's journal to Bale. And I think at this point they start going back and forth in the journals, like you had mentioned earlier, Jeff, of reading sections of the journal. I think one of the first entries that Angier's had is about the knots, and he says his mind is divided, which is also like a very important clue. Like, how can you not remember which knot you tied? But I think it goes from that scene back to, I don't even know. Next, I get confused. The timeline in this movie will still messes me up sometimes as to what.
Yeah, I mean, basically, what you have here at this point is you have the present where Borden has Angier's journal, and he is reading about his rival's obsession with him, almost as if he's kind of taking pride in it.
He gets a chuckle out of it, for sure.
It's like, wow, I really pwned him.
Yep.
And then and then you've got the growing of Angier's true stage presence, where he now has his own transported man, to which he's obsessed with actually how Borden is doing it, but Cutter tells him, "You're just going to do it my way until we find out."
Right.
The truth. It's like that's how we're going to do it. We're going to hire a double. Scarlett Johansson finds that double. He's a stinking drunk actor.
Mm-hmm.
With an overbite. He's Hugh Jackman with Freddie Mercury teeth.
This is a great performance by Hugh Jackman as this guy. Yeah.
And he is so they use him. His trick is they have doors that are further apart, and what he does is he throws his top hat over to the other end of the stage, and then when he throws open the door, he drops through a trap door, and the actor comes out the other side.
Yeah, the door opens, and a lift takes the actor up, so it's all very seamless, and you can only see the door frames because the door frames are you're not looking at the full door, you're only looking at the frame.
Side of the door.
Yeah, right, so you see the side of the door, so you see the door open on both sides, so it looks like there's no place to hide. Yeah,
right.
It's definitely it is a more showman-y version of this trick.
Yes. And what he does is when he comes through the door, because it's all in the same motion too. Everybody's moving from right to left. As he comes through the door, he catches the hat.
Yeah.
Awesome trick.
It is, and the presentation of this is, it's like, I remember seeing it, it's like I audibly said, wow, that's cool. That's pretty dang cool. So then, but the problem is that Angier is in the basement.
He's below stage. He
is not getting the applause. He's taking his bow from under the stage, and it bothers him because he knows that Borden is getting the applause directly from the audience.
Right. He's convinced that Borden goes in that door and comes out the other one.
Right. So he is now like, yeah, it's great. I'm killing it here. People are coming to see my tricks. That's fantastic. But I'm not getting it. I'm not, it's like, it's not, I'm not getting the satisfaction out of being the winner. And
he has a great line here, because Michael Caine's like, he looks like he's gonna look like your brother, and he says, I don't need him to be my brother. I need him to be me.
Right. And there's also a statement that was said earlier where it's like, nobody cares about the person in the box. They only care about the person who comes back.
Right.
To which Scarlett Johansson at one point says, I care about the man in the box. And I was like, why, hello.
Hello.
Scarlett.
Little Alice in Chains for you.
Yeah. That's not what I was thinking of.
I know.
At this point, he sends Scarlett Johansson to be his spy, essentially, because
He basically
like,
is just like, you're going to go and get it. And she's like, but what about, she says at one point, what about your wife? He's like, I don't give a fuck about my wife.
yeah,
Right.
At which point she realizes
I only
he's
care about
lost.
his secret. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
This is where he has kind of become like Borden, where he cares more about the magic than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and so this was where, now I'm going to interject here, because this was where I was starting to falter a little bit with this movie, because it's like, I don't really like the characters. The characters I liked best were Scarlett Johansson, because, they pretty much, I mean, like, she's a very interesting character, because she's very whip smart, very street smart, but, Michael Caine just kind of shows up one day with her, and it's like, well, she doesn't have any experience, but she'll do because she's pretty. Well, she's probably a hooker.
Right.
And but she's also pretty smart. She's very supportive, and she kind of gets tossed to the side. Rebecca Hall is just the tortured woman so there's some depth there. But then I was beginning to realize at this point, it's like, I'm not exactly sure what our two main characters have if they aren't, if you take away one's drive to be the best and the other's revenge, I was starting to falter on finding what their actual personalities were.
Well, yeah, and I think that's important to the movie as well as to how you follow it, because the only likable main character is Borden, and you only like him half the time.
Well, the funny thing is I didn't like him any of the time. I despised the Christian Bale character.
Well, I think that's even in half of his scene. I think because the way he is half of the time, it makes you hate him all the time. But if you take the two halves, you know what I mean?
I agree with that.
Yeah,
I agree with that. I think if you try to separate the men, you realize that there is one person who's tragic, and the other person who is obsessive and selfish.
And this goes back to the two men that Christian Bale was talking about in the beginning.
I mean, I can agree with that. However, this movie, the problem is that the movie kind of paints itself into a box. And
I think it gets out wonderfully at the end.
Well, the problem is when it comes out, I'm not on board anymore, and I think it's contrived.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like it lost me before. It was losing me before, and then when it reveals its trick, I'm like, okay, this is not the movie I signed up for.
I have a challenge for you, and we will go on talking about the movie, but go back and watch the movie knowing what you know now again, and I think you will value one of the characters a lot more.
I don't think I'll watch this movie again. That's the thing. It's like I don't want to spend another 2 hours with it.
Damn.
No, I mean, it's not that but again, it's like, I don't hate this movie. I just don't, it's one of those Christopher Nolan movies that I don't really care about. It's like, I don't want to watch it again, but I mean, again, I understand why people like it. And so I think we need to explain why Christian Bale's on trial.
Yeah.
Because at the beginning of the movie, we see Hugh Jackman die doing his trick, and it's believed that it is Borden's fault. And I knew at that moment, it's like, well, he's not dead. It's like I was like, okay, I know he's not dead. So it's kind of like, it's like watching a trick, right? I know when I put the ace of spades back into the to the card deck, Motorhead's going to find it. and is going to reveal it to me, right?
Yeah, you've been told multiple times that you won't be dead. I think you're supposed to understand that Angiers is not.
Right.
Yeah,
So
I agree. I don't think it's any shock that the Lord or whoever that's pulling the strings at the end isn't Hugh Jackman.
right. But what I'm saying is that this is the magic trick, right? You know what the end of the magic trick is. You know it. You know it when you're, you know that when you're called up on stage to do whatever this thing is with whatever this thing is. You know what the person's going to do. It's the tricking you and how much you come along on that journey that is what gets you to like that trick. You already know the beginning and the end. It's everything in between is whether or not you're going to be mystified by it, or if you're going to be like, okay, yeah, that's great. You pulled a quarter out of my ear or whatever.
Right,
it's
but
like,
you're not supposed to be mystified by this trick. I don't think the intention is to mystify you with Angiers at all. It's a ruse that the movie is pulling to make you be mystified by something else.
But every magic trick is a ruse.
No, I know that.
I think it's not a ruse. I think it's misdirection.
Yeah.
But again, every magic trick's a misdirection. Either you like it or you don't.
But misdirection is what makes it able to make the real prestige or the real trick happen, right? And there's a lot of you can call them twists in a movie, and there's a lot of them in this movie. You could say that Hugh Jackman not actually dying is a twist, and you could say that the nature of Hugh Jackman's new transporting, or the real transporting man, or whatever they call it, new transporting man, is a twist, right? But for me, the twist is Borden.
Right.
That's the real prestige in this movie. And every clue in this movie is pointing at that thing.
Yes.
But all this other stuff is misdirecting you away from it. So
while
simultaneously is the magic of this movie. Yeah.
But it simultaneously is telling you that that's what's happening.
That's
too.
what I'm saying. Every clue is pointing to what it really is. But again, all this other stuff that's happening is misdirecting you away from thinking that at all. Because you start following Angier's obsession, you start following his in the Tesla box and all of this, and you think, oh, this is the thing. It's not the thing at all. It's really fucking cool, but it's not the thing.
You also realize that Borden had visited Tesla and asked him to build a machine similar to what Angiers wants, and this is why Angiers goes there in the first place, is because he's following the journal of Borden.
Or so
at some point you assume that Borden had a similar type of machine at some point because he asked Tesla to build it for him.
Right.
So I think we need to get to the two big twists then.
Yeah.
Tesla never owns it, and Tesla's played by David Bowie, which is fantastic. I'm not gonna. I need a weirdo to play a weirdo.
He was awesome. Awesome.
I think Nolan said there was no one else in the world he could imagine, which he's absolutely right. I need a real wizard for this role.
Yeah, exactly. And while we're talking about that, we should point out the opening scene of this movie is the woods littered with top hats.
Top hats. So he says, here's a machine. Here's what I want. Andy Serkis is Tesla's like assistant or whatever. It's like his little Igor. And he's like, he never cops to actually ever building the machine. He just says, okay, well, I'll take your money and I'm going to build you this machine. But he also, like, Tesla doesn't unveil his secrets either, because he's delaying him. He's not saying why he's delaying him. He's kind of not revealing his own secrets, which is, that makes sense, because he's also kind of doing everything that he does based on Angier's money too, because he's lost funding from everybody, because Edison has kind of tightened the vice, if you will.
Yeah.
So he says, okay, I got your machine. Here, put your hat here. And he does a bunch of lightning bolts, and then nothing happens. And Angiers gets pissed. He's like, wait, you gave me all this money for or I gave you all this money and it didn't do anything. It's like basically it's all sound and fury, and ultimately signifies nothing.
Right.
He goes back later, and he says, and Tesla is now going to test it on Andy Serkis's cat.
Yeah.
And it doesn't do anything. And so then Angiers is leaving again, kind of irritated and everything, and he hears a cat. And then he sees two cats.
Fighting. Yeah.
Fighting. And then he realizes that there's a shit ton of top hats out in the woods. And at this point, I'm like, oh, man. And sign up for science fiction, damn it. Angiers gets his machine and he's able to do this much more fancier transported man where he goes in through the machine, he disappears, and he shows up 50 meters away.
It ain't even fancier. It's real. This is sorcery.
Right.
He's creating a duplicate of himself.
He is cloning himself, and he does it for 100 nights, basically, or whatever. He does it as long as it takes for Borden to show up to kill him.
Right, and it's worth noting. It's worth noting at this point too that Fallon has been visiting Borden in jail with his daughter. He learns that Lord Caldlow is going to take his daughter from him. But they have this argument, Fallon and Borden, saying, we're not going to bother him anymore. We're done. So Borden is telling Fallon, do not bother this man anymore. But still, Borden succumbs, right? He goes against his own advice, and he goes and checks out Angier's new transporting man, or whatever they called it.
The real transporting man, I think is what he called it.
There's a moment before this that I want to touch on that I find fascinating. And there's a little moment in the movie that opens up this whole like line of imaginative thought that my mind went. That I was like, ooh, what is that about? When he's got to find a backer for this act, Angiers does for the new transported man,
right?
And Cutter sets up a meeting. This rich to-do guy shows up. They show him the trick, and he says, he's sort of silenced. He's speechless at first, and he says, "Pardon me, it's very rare to see real magic. It's been many years." It's like, what's that about? Right? Like that is so intriguing to me. That's just one of those little things where it's like, ooh, that's a whole other movie, right? Like, whoa, that's really cool. And then he says, and I love this part, he says, you have to dress it up, disguise it, right? So
you got to leave doubt. Yeah, you got to leave doubt.
It's important that people don't think that this is actual sorcery, that there's still a trick to it, right? Which, I love it. It's almost it almost creates a sort of a cult idea in the movie, right? Yeah. Where there's this underbelly of something in London or wherever, right? That this guy knows about. It's like, whoa, what does that guy know? I just
write that movie, Jason.
I know I love it. I love that idea. It's just, ooh, it's neat.
He also, it should also be stated also that during this time, supposedly Scarlett Johansson's fallen in love with Christian Bale. Christian Bale is kind of, again, all over the place. He's having issues with his marriage, and Rebecca Hall kills herself.
Yeah.
And they're at one point, Christian Bale goes to see Scarlett Johansson, and she asks about his wife, and he's like, I don't want to talk about her.
I've never loved her.
Yeah, I've never loved her, and all of that. And she's like, oh, that's
cold, man.
Yeah, that's pretty much.
You're no better than Angiers.
Right.
Basically.
Because she was in love with Angiers, and he sent her away to be away from him, to get, to basically act as a spy, when that's not really, she didn't like where he was going.
And then she realized Borden did the same to his wife, and she didn't want to be around that.
Right.
So Borden loses both of his women, Angiers has lost his, and now it's just down to them, basically.
Right. So, so then you see, Borden and Fallon have been, kind of basically spying the situation. It's like every night they take this big box someplace. What's that all about? And he then goes to the show a couple of times, I think, before he actually gets backstage. And there is, well, never mind. That was going to be a wrong comment, so never mind. I'm not going to say that. Well, I was thinking there was another clue here, but that's not true. So anyway, that's when it kind of catches up to the beginning of the movie where he sees him disappear. He knows he's going through a trap door, but how is he showing up in the balcony and review, or whatever? And so, and he sees, oh my God, he's dropping into this tank of water. We've got to, where's the key to the lock? Where's the key, all of that. And he tries to get, much like how Michael Caine tried to get Piper Perabo out of the tank that she was drowning in, he tries to get Angier out of the tank, but he dies.
And here's something that confuses me about this film. Maybe the one thing that confuses me about this film. Why is Michael Caine, throughout the trial, say that Borden was watching him die? He literally says, I saw him watch him drown. But in reality, he was trying to save him.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think it could be that he didn't actually see him, right? Or did he?
He grabbed the axe from him. He came down there, and yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah. No, I wonder at this point in time, is he? Yeah.
Because
I don't know either, Chuck.
It's important to note though, and Caine had never been downstairs behind the scenes.
He doesn't know the trick. He doesn't
know that the box is there every time. So he has an assumption that Borden put the box there to trap Angiers.
And maybe he had it could be explained away as a second thought or a second,
He decided he was going to save him. He didn't want to kill him anymore, but he still, in fact, murdered him. So that makes sense.
In Michael Caine's mind, there's no other reason for that tank to be there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because they have history with it, too. Right. It's the same tank that Angier's wife died in.
Yeah, so there's another thing that was said at Piper Perabo's funeral where, where Michael Caine says, I knew a guy who had drowned and didn't breathe for 5 minutes, and he said that it was like coming home.
Right.
I think that was meant to be like, the idea of dying was,
and it was
she didn't suffer, don't worry.
Right. It was to console him. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I say that because that's a little bit later. It's pretty important. So, when Lord Codlow.
Yeah, sure. Codlow, I think his name is Codlow.
Okay. So when he shows up to get the artifacts that he's going to take home after all this trial and everything, Michael Caine is there because he wants that Tesla machine, and Roger Reese is like, well, I can't stop you from speaking your mind if you're here when the guy shows up to take it. So he intends to be there, and he realizes, hey, you're Angiers. And he's like, yeah, ain't that something? Mm-hmm. And basically at that point, I think he reveals to him what the secret was of the machine. And it doesn't sit well with Cutter.
Nope.
Because at the end of the day, and this is one of the more interesting themes. One of the themes I liked the most, actually, about the movie was that he was so goddamn determined to be better than Borden that he was willing to kill himself like a dozen fucking times to draw him out.
100 times.
Yeah.
Yep.
So he, and the thing is that the person he is today is not even the original anymore. The original is long dead.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
so yeah, and I also like it brings up the question: who's actually taking the bows, right? Who's receiving
Right.
the applause? Yeah.
Right.
You're still below the stage.
Yeah.
The guy who stepped in the machine is still not, assumedly, getting the bows.
Right.
He's the man in the box, literally.
Yep. And Scarlett Johansson cares about the man in the box.
Yes, she does.
And
All
and
100
he's
of
dead.
them.
All 100 of them. He's dead. So, and also, Borden realizes what's going on because one, they both have left trick passages for them in their diaries, which was pretty clever. But then Lord Hornblower shows up to say, "Hey, here's your daughter. She's coming home to live with me." So it becomes a little bit of a magical Les Mis also.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to take your daughter home, raise her.
Yep.
I win. And he makes Borden sound like a stark raving mad crazy person.
Right.
Because it's like, that's the guy that I'm here to, that I'm supposedly that I killed.
Right.
And then Fallon shows up.
And here's a cool scene. He throws him the rubber ball.
Yeah.
Right when Fallon shows up, he throws the rubber ball to him,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm like,
Right.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right. So Fallon, he's like, you know what you got to do. We know what we got to, what the deal is.
Go live your life. Go live all of your life.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And so Borden is then hanged.
Well, yeah, let's not go through this too quickly because this is super cool.
Right.
Borden goes through another trapdoor, right? When he gets hanged. It's almost like a magic trick. Like he's
Right.
disappearing through the hole in the floor.
Right.
And right as that's happening, Michael Caine is talking to Angiers in the basement of that building.
Mm-hmm.
And he's basically like, you're an asshole, just to
Right.
make it short.
Also, by the way, remember when I said that, like, drowning is like coming home?
Mm-hmm.
It's the most excruciating thing you'll ever go through.
Yeah.
It's like, that's not
Yeah.
what he said. He said it was the most terrible thing or whatever it was.
And then he walks out of the building and he sees Fallon, and he gives him a look like a knowing, like, huh.
Yeah. Hey,
Yeah,
tip of the
I
cap
knew
to
it.
you.
I knew it.
Yeah, and he came, and it's Borden. And,
Yep, he walks out of the shadows, and it's Borden in Fallon's uniform.
Right. And he's like, we were, twins, basically. And
He's
then,
like, brothers? Twins?
yeah.
Angiers is like shocked. This is the
he's-
ultimate.
It's
This is
amazing.
the ultimate prestige, right? Like he was shocked. He couldn't believe it. Like the magic trick worked, and it worked on me. Like I want to ask you now, Jeff. At any point in this movie, did you think Fallon was played by Christian Bale?
Yes.
You did.
Yeah, it was obvious that he was wearing makeup. I wasn't sure until I realized that there were two things. One, it's like, that guy is wearing makeup. I wonder who that is. And then they revealed the clones. And then I remembered Tesla was only the password to get into the decipher the code. So he never went to Tesla. They're brothers. And I walked it back that way, and there was still like 45 minutes left in the movie.
Mm.
And it's like, okay. So that was one of my, that was why it didn't really come, because it's like the whole time it's like, now some of the other stuff, like then after that I thought, oh yeah, that's right. Scarlett Johansson said he always has makeup around,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, okay, To which I agreed at that point with Angier. It's like, yeah, he always has need for that, or whatever. So it's like, okay, whatever. But then after I realized, it's like, well, he never saw Tesla, so he's not a clone. He's brother. He's got the makeup. And that guy looks like he's wearing makeup.
You're not the first person I've heard who's figured it out, and they generally are about as lukewarm to it as you are, because they figured it out. It's almost like me and Knives Out a little bit.
Yep.
Yeah.
So there you go. I just knives out you.
I think I'm really bad about watching movies and trying to figure them out a lot. I think
will say,
this movie for me was so engrossing that I didn't try.
Yeah,
and I think that's important.
It's the same way. And that's why I think, to Chuck's point too, even with the way you kind of ended up figuring out, I do think that if you ever revisit this movie, there's a lot there.
I mean, again, like I said, there's a lot to this movie. I mean, I've got a big long list of things that I can say. Yeah, I really like that, and the experience of watching the movie wasn't excruciating, but it's one of those things where it's like, in a sort of a way, this is a slightly better M. Night Shyamalan movie, right? In my opinion. And when I say slightly better, I mean slightly better than his best. Yeah, like Sixth Sense.
Sixth Sense is pretty darn good.
Right.
So you don't like The Sixth Sense?
No. I'm saying that this is like a slightly. What I should say is, I really like Sixth Sense. This movie is a slightly flashier good M. Night Shyamalan movie.
Okay.
The production value is a little higher, is what I mean by that. So I like Sixth Sense better than this movie. But the production value of this movie I like more than Sixth Sense. That's what I mean by it. So it's a flashier, more
it's an ensemble film too. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas the Sixth Sense really needs three characters to carry the entire weight and the entire secret of that movie.
Right.
But
we need to unpack a few things, though. Which Borden is still alive? It's the Borden who loves Sarah.
I think so.
Yes,
who has the daughter?
Father,
absolutely.
The real father of the child.
So he gets reunited with his real daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So he has that. His only real fault, and this is what I was talking about earlier, was his dedication to the trick that he couldn't be completely honest with his wife. But all in all, he was a good person. His brother was the zealous overactor who continued to go after Angiers even after I don't know their two names. You don't know their two names. Borden says to him, "Do not go after this man anymore. Mm-hmm. We are done. Let's go live our lives," basically. But he loses his brother to his zealousness. So that character, if you can separate them, I think has real value. The other Borden character is kind of an asshole.
Sure. And I will say that I am a little warmer to that in retrospect. But and again, I really, 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 really like the performances in this movie. I just feel like some of the most important characters aren't quite rich enough to carry exactly all the weight of the themes. Like, you almost have to apply some. You have to give some of yourself to help them carry the weight. In a lot of ways,
I can understand what you mean a little bit in that regard of even by calling it in some ways contrived, just because in order for the movie to trick you, even though it's given you a lot of clues, a lot of information along the way, it has to sacrifice something.
Right.
In order, and what it has to sacrifice for you is a moral.
Exactly. And the other thing is also some of that characterization, like to really get me to,
or I shouldn't say immoral, but morality.
Right. And for me to have really kind of really bite into the idea that there is a good and a bad brother, I needed those scenes where right next to each other where you see them acting very, very opposite of one another. The problem is you can't do that.
You can't
do that in the movie. Right. So I'm stuck with the catch-22 at that point. I really want something done, but I don't know if I would have liked the movie any better because it would have created a new problem.
Sure.
So I look at this a little bit, another Christian Bale movie that a lot of people like that I didn't. I look at this a little bit like Ford versus Ferrari, where you have these two characters. One character is the best driver for this circumstance. The other character is the best car builder for this company. And outside of that, you don't know much about them. Mm-hmm. You get flashes of things, but at the end of the day, by all accounts, Ken Miles is not an easy person to work with, and Carroll Shelby is making fistloads of money from a company that is you cannot root for in the late 60s. Mm-hmm. So what am I left with? Well, I'm left with some pretty cool racing scenes, I guess. That's not enough. Yeah, for me at least. But that's
I would say The Prestige is a much better movie than Ford versus Ferrari, but I get what you're saying. As a comparison.
That's just like one of those things.
There's a lot more layers and depth to The Prestige than
absolutely. I'm just saying that like a lot of people say, "Oh my gosh, you root so hard for these people in Ford versus Ferrari." What are you rooting for? Capitalism. It's like you're rooting for a shitty car company run by shitty people to win a race. Who cares? It's like these are shitty people in this movie. I can't root for them. But so in a way, it's like I'm kind of conflating that, right? But it's the idea of I didn't love these characters. I was missing something from those characters that the movie, for as nice as all of the other stage dressing was,
Well, that makes this movie interesting to me because it doesn't tell you who to root for ever.
No, it doesn't.
Until the very end, it like hands you a reason to believe in one person a little bit. But the movie itself is a magic trick that way.
Yeah, it's like
another way I love it.
I was actually rooting for Scarlett Johansson and Rebecca Hall to tell these assholes to get fucked.
Well, they were the better people throughout most of this movie, for sure.
Right.
And I think that was important, again, to the characters and their drive. At least one of the Bordens, we'll call him Freddie. I think Freddie was the bad one. And Angiers.
Yeah, and I think too, if you're gonna tackle themes like this of obsession and revenge and one-upsmanship, selfishness, that it's kind of hard to come away with many likable characters.
Right.
But these are still stories that are told and can be told well, and at the end of the day, yeah, maybe everyone was an asshole, but the movie can still accomplish a lot of things, and I think this one does.
Sure. Yeah, and that's hardly my.
Sure.
My biggest issue is where I was faltering with the characters, and then I got the sci-fi cloning stuff, and I was like, okay, out.
That is a bit of a right turn.
Yeah,
for sure. I love just a couple things. So I don't know if we ever actually mentioned the fact that Fallon / Borden shoots and kills out Angier.
Angier,
but before he does so, I love the moment where Angier asks him which one he was and which one was taking the bows, and he said that we took turns.
Yeah,
and that just blows Angier's goddamn mind.
Yep. Yeah. Right? How could he share that with anyone? Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is funny because Angier probably would have. He probably would have shared that with his wife if she had not died. Mm-hmm. So
absolutely. Yeah. Anything else?
Awesome movie,
gentlemen?
Awesome movie. That's all I want to say. I love it.
I don't. Again, I'm not going to take away you guys. You guys love this movie. while it didn't register with me, I'm do not take that away from you whatsoever. I don't think you're wrong in your belief, because there was a lot of things I did like. It's just, didn't work out in the end for me.
And then it ends with a Tom York song, so.
Yes.
So it's like if I didn't already love it.
Right. Agreed.
So
Cool. All right. Well,
things aren't going to get any lighter next week.
No, they're not.
What's next week?
Next week is Boys in the Hood.
Boys in the Hood.
Very timely.
Very timely. Yes.
It's a very interesting way to tell a very timely and timeless, as it turns out, unfortunately, story. So that should be. We might say some things that some people may disagree with. We might say some things that some people will really agree with, considering current climate of things. Let's just put it that way.
Yes, indeed.
That's me saying, let's get political, assholes. Let's do it.
Or if you just want to come around and listen to three middle-aged white men talk awkwardly about African-American politics, then that should be entertaining in and of itself.
Yeah.
I'm gonna stand firm. Hopefully with all the right things. So
Do the right thing, Jeff.
I'm gonna.
Cool. All right.
All right.
Well,
So every Wednesday, new episodes right here, filmseizure.com. You can also find us at Facebook and Twitter at Film Seizure. We will have our shows at the various places wherever you like to take your podcasts. Kind of like, how do you like to take your tea? There's many different answers, and so do we. We have many different answers. We have podcasts on SoundCloud, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and Spotify. We also upload stuff to YouTube. Getting a little bit of traffic over at YouTube. I'm kind of digging it.
Nice.
So yeah, you can do that. Mondays, I have Monster Mondays. I don't know. Let's see what's coming up this Monday. Village of the Damned.
Ooh, the original?
Yeah, the original. That's really good. That's a very good one. Then
Creepy-eyed children in that one, right?
Yeah, super creepy.
Yep. Then you've got every Saturday, at least until the end of the year, is 00 Saturdays, little James Bond essays coming from yours truly. And then, hey, what do you guys do on Friday mornings?
I take a shit. I read I read B-movie Enema.
I read B-movie Enema.
It's better than a squatty potty, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, drink your coffee Friday mornings. Go hit your AM shitter. And
usually when I read B-movie Enema, I don't even need my morning coffee to have my daily constitutional.
It's your weekly colonic. So go over there, check that out, bmovieenema.com. So yeah, all right, guys.
Cool, awesome.
By the way, my evil twin loved this movie.
I know. Jeff Fredo.
He wears really, really bad mutton chop makeup.
Yep.
Nice.
Anyway, so until next week, I am Jeff Arbuckle.
I'm Chuck Moore.
I'm Jason Oliver, and you have been listening to Film Seizure.